You're listening to the Worldwide Underground. This is episode number 8. I'm your host, Gabriel Teodros. And I hope you know by now, this is an experiment in long-form storytelling. I'm having conversations with people that inspire me in life in the hopes that they might inspire you too. We also hope to shine a light on underheard stories behind music, arts, culture. And I'm realizing with this episode in particular that we're really just talking about storytelling across all mediums. I just so happen to come from hip hop, but as you can see with every episode, we're stretching way beyond just music. Today's guest is someone very near and dear to my heart. So near and dear to my heart that I went and married her. Her name is Ijeoma Oluo. And she's getting ready to release her third book. Comes out in just a few days. It's called Be a Revolution. How everyday people are fighting oppression and changing the world, and how you can too. It's Ijeoma's third book, dealing with the issue of race in America, starting, of course, with the New York Times bestseller, So You Want to Talk About Race. The second book, another classic called Mediocre, The Dangerous Legacy of White Male America. And this one, Be a Revolution. 3 vital texts. I gotta say this one, she wrote this one for us, y'all. I mean, she wrote every book for us, but this one, I really feel like it's a classic for our generation, for the movement, for Seattle, for the Northwest and beyond. I just can't wait for y'all to jump into this book and to hear this conversation. I want to thank everyone who supports the Worldwide Underground. This show is made possible completely by the listeners. If you want to tap in and help support the storytelling that we've got going on over here, be sure to subscribe. GabrielTeodros.substack.com. Ijeoma also is absolutely the reason that I'm even messing with Substack, so go ahead and head over to her Substack as well. You'll be glad you did. IjeomaOluo.substack.com. And in the description of this episode, I have a link up where you can pre-order the book. Those first week sales are important for any writer. We talk about why in this episode. And there's also tour information on that website that I'll have linked up. We're going to be in Brooklyn, New York on the day that the book is launched, doing an event January 30th, followed by DC on the 31st, Baltimore, Atlanta, Detroit, Toronto, and then back in Seattle for 2 events on February 8th and 9th. Hope to see y'all at one of the events, in person or virtually. With no further ado, here's my conversation with the brilliant author, Ijeoma Oluo. Thank y'all for being here once again. Hey, it's the Worldwide Underground. It's my joy and pleasure to introduce you to my spouse, the love of my life, Ijeoma Oluo. How are you doing?
I am well. How are you?
I'm good. For people wondering, we are not in the same place right now. You're at your new office. Do you want to tell people about the office?
Yeah, this is kind of the result of months and months of prodding from my therapist to get a space outside of the house where I can't be mom all of the time and interrupted, and have a little bit of quiet and time to be creative and a new room to decorate,
Yes.
So I'm loving it.
I love it. Yeah, and I'm in my studio at home. And I was saving this interview for the release of your book. And we are here. Be a Revolution. How everyday people are fighting oppression and changing the world, and how you can too. I am so excited about the world reading this book. I'm lucky for so many reasons. And I think one of many reasons that I'm lucky to be married to you is that I got to read every chapter of this book as you finish writing them. So I have a very, very personal connection to this book for
I'm
obvious
lucky too to
reasons.
have someone who is eager to read every, not only every chapter, multiple versions
Yeah.
of every chapter of a very long book.
And I love every page of it, every moment of it, you know? It's a lot easier for me than it is for you to write the book. So for people that don't have this inside look, how would you describe this book to people?
I would say I usually describe it first with kind of the reason why it exists.
Mhm.
If you've been doing work around race or racism, or honestly just kind of existing as a racialized person in the United States, I think we all share this general frustration of trying to talk about issues of racism, and especially systemic racism, and having this kind of sympathetic, oh, it's so bad, and I wish there was something I could do, and this dismissal. And I think, especially in light of 2020 and how many emotions were heightened and how many people cared and did very little, I really wanted to take some time to not only show that something could be done, but that things have been done, that things are being done every day, that the reason why, you and I exist as Black people in this country are because of things that people have done and continue to do. And I wanted to, not only for my own personal reasons, spend time in that. I wanted to celebrate it, and I wanted to kind of take away this excuse from people who think there's nothing to do. And to be fair, it's an excuse that isn't just, I think, kind of born in a selfish place. It's something. It's an idea that's perpetrated
Mm.
purposefully. This idea that it is too big and you can't do anything, so why even try? That that idea exists because it serves these systems that are exploiting so many of us.
Absolutely. Yeah, one of the themes that we've been talking about on this podcast from episode to episode is how so many of the oppressive systems that we see held up from here in the United States to even what's happening in Gaza and in Palestine is because there's a war of stories, and people will believe these lies. And when you believe these lies that are just told by one oppressive system, it becomes easier to dehumanize someone and justify like atrocious violence, right? So I think that the work that we do as storytellers in different ways, right? Because I think of musicians and DJs and writers, obviously as storytellers, like it's the one thing that unites everyone who's on this podcast is that we all are engaged in storytelling in some way. Um, I think what you did with this book is so powerful because it's uncovering so many of those stories and histories that don't get written about, right? From movement histories and the parts of the movement history that doesn't really get like a light shown on it. You're talking about like the effects of certain, projects and campaigns that have happened around the country, but you're talking to the people that have done it. And in these pages, like people will read about like the shortcomings and the questions and even the self-doubt that people go through and how it really is like everyday people that are working to change the world. But as those stories get erased, people believe it's not possible, So I don't know, with all of that, like what are some of your like favorite stories and stories that surprised you doing research for this book? Because I know you interviewed like was it 40 some people?
Yeah, there are 34 people profiled
34.
in the book, and I spoke with quite a few more that, for other reasons. And I was regularly surprised by people, whether it was hearing their stories, some of the surprising ways in which people come to this work, um, their methodologies. People shared ideas that really challenged me, and you were right there for it. Often I would come into your studio after
Hmm.
a discussion, or we would meet up after, when we were on the road talking with people, and I would just be like, wow,
Yeah.
that's I need to process this. This is really challenging the way I think about these issues. I even said in the book, the chapter on the section on, the hierarchies of bodies and mind, looking at disability, justice, and race,
Hmm.
fundamentally challenged and changed me. And the discussions I had in there really did. Um, and then also, I would say, overall, a theme that challenged me, that I kept, I don't know, surprised me, didn't really challenge me, was just realizing how often people had to flow with the work and had to
Mhm.
let the work change to fit their needs and where they were, and the needs of community. And almost no one I spoke to was doing the work they had started out doing, but they were still doing the work.
Mhm.
And that it is okay to say, this is taking too much out of me now, and I need to move into another space, or my skills don't serve this anymore, or it doesn't serve me anymore, and I need to move into this space, and how important that is if you want to be able to do this for your entire life.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's two things in that. Like one is disability justice. Like I love that chapter, but I also just want to highlight that I think you did a beautiful job of weaving disability justice throughout the entire book. It's not just one section, you know? And it's one of my favorite things about this book. And also, yeah, not continuing to do the work that you started. That actually makes me think a bit about your career in writing, and it was something I was hoping we could talk about because you, like, remind me what age you were when you first started writing, taking it seriously.
Oh, like for work, like publicly writing,
Yeah,
I would have been 33.
33. Yeah, and then when was and then how old were you when your first book came out?
I was 30, almost, yeah, I was 37. Yeah.
I love it. I love it. I just remember, you know, being in my 20s thinking like, oh, it's too late, you know? And here you are starting a career like in your late 30s. And I have to say, like, now that we're both in our 40s, like, this is my favorite decade so far, you know? Yeah.
Yeah. No,
What it,
it's wild to me, as a parent, I see this a lot too, and you've got to see this too now as a step parent, the
mm-hmm,
pressure on young people and this idea that if they don't have it all figured out, by 18, their life is over, or if they fail a class at 15, their life is over. And not only do you not really know who you are at that age, you're you may know you're one version of who you're going to be, of the many yous you'll be over your lifetime, and it isn't too late. And we have to live our life like that, like there is still opportunity until the day that we die. And there's beauty in that, in knowing you can always change course, in knowing that you're still building to something.
yeah.
And I feel really blessed to have come back to writing, which was my childhood love, later in life, actually. Very
Mm-hmm,
glad that it worked the way it did, because I know now on a deeper level, having watched this shift, being able to make this shift, that I can do it again and again and again and again.
yeah.
And it may not always work out, but then I can do it again. And
Mm-hmm,
it's beautiful. Life is an adventure, and my writing is an adventure. But life in general. If I woke up tomorrow and couldn't write, of course I would have to process and grieve that. But the idea that I would be done, no, you know.
yeah.
And I'm so happy that I was able to discover that. And I really want, when I'm talking in colleges or high schools, I really want these young people who are really feeling um, this pressure, and especially young people coming out of the early years of this ongoing pandemic, feeling like they lost vital time, like they're behind, which is impossible. When we all lost 3 years of our lives, how can you be behind? But that's
Right.
what we're telling young people, that they have to catch up, that they fell behind somehow. Instead of, you have a long life and you are
Yeah.
where you are, and we're so glad you're here. And now you get to shape something new, and none of it has to be permanent. And
Exactly.
it can, if it doesn't serve you, you can let it go. Like, that's such a beautiful thing that we're not telling young people, and I'm trying so desperately to get that message out to them whenever I have the privilege of being with young people.
Yeah. It's such a liberating feeling and thought, you know, and I wonder, like, if you had started, you know, a career in writing in your 20s, would you have this perspective now, you know?
Hmm. No, I don't think I would. I really
Yeah.
don't. You know, I think I would have been, struggling and building and tired, and I would have been in that striving space instead of a
Hmm.
thriving space, and I probably would have burned out, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm so glad now to be able to see it as, an opportunity, um, and in order for it to be a choice, something that I was able to deliberately move into, knowing that it suited me, knowing myself more,
Yeah. Yeah. That's real. We don't tell young people enough, but I think people of all ages can feel stuck in a career or an identity or even an idea. Like, I know personally, you've seen it more than anyone. I've been going through it just since leaving KXP.
Hmm.
Having I have moments sometimes where, like, my mind knows it was not a mistake, but there's some part of me that's like, I walked away, or I gave up something important. But I don't know. I love that you are there to remind me, not just because you actually remind me, but also in your life, like in the way that you've walked through this world, that there's always time to redefine and reinvent yourself. And as long as we're in this body, like, we've got time to try new things, So
Hmm.
yeah, yeah, it's a trip being in this, like, this space in between, where this
Yeah.
interview wouldn't have happened, by the way, on KXP, because it would have been a conflict of interest.
Right. And I'm so excited for you, love. And
Thank
and
you.
I'll hold that space of being excited for you in the times when you forget to be excited for yourself, when it's harder to be excited for yourself. Um, you're and it's funny because, being your partner, right?
Hmm.
I saw you trying to adjust to being someone who did work 40-hour,
Yeah, it was different. It was
right?
different. Yeah.
Right. And that was awkward for you, and that was an adjustment, and it's easy to forget that once that adjustment's made, that, who
Yeah.
you are at core and the potential of who you are doesn't have a title, and doesn't have a particular salary. It's
And it
you.
might and it might not be what people expect also,
Mhm.
And this is just, like, I don't mean to sit here and talk about myself, but it's an easy example for anyone who's, going through similar things at any age in life. Sometimes it might not make sense to people, but something about yourself and in you. And I think you had a similar moment when you quit your job and decided to do writing for a full-time job. Can you talk about what that transition was like for you when you first?
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
it was wild because it was one of the first times I made a major decision that just chose myself. Um,
Mhm. Mhm.
I had been raised to think of other people first, to think of the needs of my family first. And that's something, as an oldest child, as a Black woman, as a mother, that I felt. And so much of my life had been structured around that. And I had a good job, like you at KXP, I was making more than I had ever made in my life.
Mhm.
I had bought a home, and it was like something took over me once I opened the door to that authenticity. And I would say, I think, love, I saw that with you as well when you started producing more and
Yeah.
reawakening this, you know, you've always loved music, but reawakening the love of creating music
Oh
in
yeah.
yourself.
Producing is unlocked something different in me for sure. I have not been this excited about music in the last, like, 15 years as I have in the last 1 year. And I don't even think.
It's been so fun to watch. I love
Thank
it.
you. I can't wait for the world to find out too. I don't think they
Hmm.
really know yet.
No, well, and you're just getting started. I don't think
Yeah,
you really know yet.
that's
Like,
true.
there's so much in there. Like, it's so fun to watch you surprise yourself with what you can do. And for me, it was this thing too, where it's like once you open that door to that authenticity, um that little bit of something that really serves this need in you, that's deeper, and more long standing than those immediate needs, right? And I want to be clear, those immediate needs are real. I don't regret
Yeah.
any of the time I spent doing what I had to do to pay my bills, feed myself and my children. Like that mattered,
Yeah.
and those choices were real. And there were times where the idea of leaving and writing not only wouldn't have occurred to me, but wouldn't have been feasible.
One of the things that I think I get a front row for that a lot of people don't know about you is how giving you are when it comes to advice and helping out other writers of color navigating the industry. Like you've been, I would say, almost like radically transparent about the business when it comes to assisting other writers of color. Can you talk about why that's important for you?
Yeah. And I would say, of course, you are very much that same person in the music industry, if not more. The amount of calls you get, I get to see firsthand from
Thank you.
every aspect of the business that people want to ask you about, and then their personal lives as well, while they're at it. And you're always so generous with that. For me, with writing, one is because when I started writing, I didn't have, a journalism degree or even like an English lit degree. I have a political science degree.
Hmm.
And the business of writing was a thing I had to find on my own. And I had to
Right.
find it as a Black woman, which is different. The access is different. You don't have the introductions. You don't have that kind of immediate believability of your worth, right?
Hmm.
Um, and I built it and I put a lot of work into building it. And I really do view the greater writing world as like my workspace and my coworkers. And I want more Black coworkers,
Yes.
I want people to thrive. It means so much to what we're all able to do. And then also as a writer, I'm inspired by writers, right? That's why I write, because first I loved reading, because I loved words. And the people who come into this space who are able to come in and share stories and write in ways that we haven't seen before inspire me every single day. And I want to feed that. I want to feed that by making it easier for more people to come into writing and stay there and pay
Yeah.
their bills there. And so many Black writers and brown writers and disabled writers quit writing because they can't get by doing it, because there are too many barriers in front of them. And I want to change that because these stories matter. It matters not only for me as someone who doesn't want to be the only Black person at conferences,
Hmm.
um, it matters to everyone who wants to be seen and heard, who wants their stories shared, who wants to understand why the world works the way it works. Um, it's who wants to be inspired, who wants to laugh, who wants all these things that writing can bring. It really matters, and so I'm always excited to be able to share what I've learned,
Hmm.
and continue to learn with other people.
Yeah, I love that. I love that about you. Um, on that note, what are some books that you have recently read that you've loved and books that you're excited about?
Well, you've been here as I've been making my way through the Broken Earth series, which I almost feel embarrassed to say that I hadn't read yet.
It's
I
all
had
good.
read, of course, some of N.K. Jemisin's short stories.
Yes.
I'm loving it. I am so close to being done with the second one. I was
Amazing.
actually just listening further today, and really, really, really deeply enjoying it. Another book, actually, I have here, um, that I loved. Do I have it here? Do I have it here? Maybe I have it somewhere else. Um, was Yeah, I don't have it here. It was by oh gosh, you know me and names, love. Um, Betsy Gaines Quammen, her book True West,
Oh yeah.
which you were there as I was reading it and
Hmm.
continuously like being like, you won't believe this, also this, and what about this? A really, really good book. I mean, I'm a huge fan
She was
of her writing and her work.
she was someone you referenced in mediocre, yes?
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah.
She was a huge part of Mediocre. If you like that Buffalo Bill chapter
Hmm.
and the Bundy Brothers chapter, please look up her work. She was a big contributor to a lot of the information that went into that book, but also she's really at the forefront of telling true stories about the West, warts and all, and
Hmm.
looking at the roots of the rising white nationalism and violence, extremism
Hmm.
throughout the West
Hmm.
and in the history of that. And so this book, True West, is looking at the mythology around Westerns, that whole idea and how these mythologies have contributed to the extremism that we're seeing and what that extremism looks like and the real risk that we're at. That it doesn't make headlines, and of course, living in the West as we do.
Yeah.
Um, just on the other side of the mountains from some of the largest extremist groups in the country,
Yeah.
and recognizing that it is never reported even in our local news, that we have
Hmm.
heavily armed militias gearing up for a race war,
Yeah.
um, and it's growing, and we don't talk about it and we don't talk about why, and she's really doing important work around that. So that was a book that I poured through, loved, messaged her multiple times,
Hmm.
that I loved it, slash it was keeping me up at night and making it hard for me
Yes.
to be able to sleep.
It's wild to realize, like, especially in a city like Seattle, like how much we're in a bubble. And it's almost like once you just leave the city limits, it's like another country, you know? Like,
Right. And we're in a bubble surrounded by extremism,
yeah.
and it's here. And so that's the thing too. I think you can think you're in a bubble, but
Hmm.
those elements also are here.
Absolutely.
you
Yeah.
know like we have people here who are parts of those groups, who live in Seattle, who live
Hmm.
in our suburbs, who have guns, and we saw that in 2020 with the
Yeah.
chop, right? We saw
Yeah.
these white men showing up with their big trucks with American flags at the back and their semi-automatic rifles on their shoulders,
Hmm.
eagerly
Hmm.
hoping that they would have an excuse to shoot the people that were, trying to fight for Black lives. And that was right there at the moment's notice, ready to be called up. This is, a real threat. And it's a threat that, our oppressors know they can call up. It's something that Donald Trump gleefully called up and nurtured time and time again.
I was just gonna bring that up with the Capitol when they tried to overturn the election and took
Mhm.
over like that.
Mhm.
There was people from Seattle. There was cops from Seattle, like in the middle of that. You know.
Right, right. And he
Yeah.
spent months stoking that, feeding that, recruiting for that,
Mm-hmm.
because he really honestly thought it would be enough to actually take over the country. And one day it may well be.
Yeah. Whew. Scary, scary thoughts, scary times. Um, any other books you're excited about while we're talking about books?
I mean, here's the problem. You know me, love. You and me, we go on a date
Yes.
and then we go to a bookstore and then I
Yes.
buy
A lot of books.
a lot of books. And so asking what books I'm excited about, I mean, have
Yeah.
I ever bought less than 5 books at the bookstore?
Not since our house fire.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that,
I don't.
that and that's a real thing, y'all. Like we lost all of our entire book collection in the house fire of 2020. So these bookstore runs have been both both for new books, but also like replenishing like all of our, classics from our life that we've loved, that
Right.
we don't have a copy of anymore.
Absolutely. This
Yeah.
is one actually I really do. I think when I picked it up, I was like, I remember I had you read the inside thing of it multiple times. I was like, no, I don't think you read it close enough. Read it again. It's really
What's
interesting.
what's the author's name again? Is it
Zaina Arafat. It's
okay?
a memoir of a Palestinian American
Oh yeah.
queer woman.
I remember reading that.
And it's
Yeah.
not a memoir; it's like a fiction. Sorry.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And it just seems so deeply interesting. It's called You, and the title, You Exist Too Much.
You exist too much. That is a hard title. Oof.
Right,
Yeah.
right, right. So that's one that, like, when I have a little time, I'm like, that's why, part of why it's here, right?
Yeah, yeah. I love that. Since we are on the, the dawn of the book release, can you talk about why first week sales are important in the publishing world?
Yeah, all right. First, let me start by saying the New York Times bestseller list is whack in ways
Mhm.
that a lot of people don't get, and
Mhm.
it's not actually really based on bestsellers. Like, that's part of the equation, but they have a secret formula that they don't talk about that studies have shown is inherently racist.
Mm.
Um, but that being said, because most people don't know it, people really do look toward that list for what they're going to buy, not only individuals, but
Mhm.
bookstores, libraries. So making that bestseller list is really, really huge for the success of a book. And your best chance at making it is the first week,
Right.
because all pre-sales count towards that first week's sales. So
Mhm.
really getting the word out. If you were like, I might buy it now, might buy it later, buy it now. And
Yeah,
I say this for any author that you really want to support,
that's
especially
right.
an author that isn't a guaranteed top bestseller. For any Black and brown author, because
Mhm.
even if their books have proven themselves, you have to prove yourself every single time to book buyers and to
Mhm.
libraries. They don't come excited for your books, you know, and you really do have to prove it and show it. And so one of the best ways you can support an author when their book comes out is to buy that book as soon as possible. Buy it before it comes out or that first week, if at all
Mhm.
possible. And those all increase the chance of getting to that list. And that list increases the chance that bookstores around the country and libraries around the country, and beyond, will buy the book and carry it in stores, because people can't buy it if they don't know it exists, because it's not on any shelves.
That's the truth. Yeah. And in support of this first week, you have a whole tour coming up. I'm very excited about. I'm going to be joining you on it. Any cities and spots you're excited about? I got the dates in front of me. I could read them out if you want,
Mhm.
you know.
I'm excited about all of them. I think I don't have the dates memorized, but I do have all the cities memorized. I really hope everyone comes. Don't miss those stops. Don't miss the DC stop.
Yeah.
Yeah, don't miss the DC stop. They're going to be really fun. We're trying our best to make things as safe as we can as well. And I do have now, if you go to my website, to where you can pre-order.
I'll have the page linked up underneath the episode
Yeah.
though for people
Okay.
so you can you
If
can
if
you
you
can
go
click
there, there
directly
is
to
a
that
link
site. Mhm.
for an accessibility page, and it's just a spreadsheet where we went to every single venue and asked, what is the accessibility look like, and what does your COVID safety look like, so that you can make an informed decision, because we really do want people to come, but we want them to feel comfortable and safe and confident
Yeah.
coming.
Yeah.
And we do have a couple of virtual events as well for people who are like, hey, now is not the time for me to be around people. Um, but I am so excited. Writing is really solitary.
Yeah.
This book project has been more communal than anything else I've worked on. But, even when it came time to get down and be like, put pen to paper, you saw me. I was in my office from
Mhm.
morning till very, very late at night, every single
That's
day,
right.
getting more and more pale and yellow, um,
Seattle problems,
to the
yo.
to the current yellow that I'm rocking right now. And it's fun to see people and connect with people. And
Yeah.
I'm excited about the conversation set up with some really amazing people. Some I haven't met yet, some I know and love.
Mhm.
And I'm so glad to have you with me. Not only to, like, I love sharing experiences with you, but you also know I really hate flying.
Yeah.
And I don't know, like, I like sitting next to you. I like being able to lean into you on that plane. So,
I like it
you
too.
know,
I like it too.
so people should come too, because they get to meet you.
Right? If I'm not hiding that day, I'll be the one wearing a mask. So yeah, January 30th in Brooklyn, the 31st in DC, February 1st in Baltimore, the 2nd in Atlanta, the 4th in Detroit, the 5th in Toronto, And then we'll be back in Seattle on the 8th and 9th. I'll be hosting a conversation with you at Third Place Books, Lake Forest Park, aka the bookstore right by Octavia Butler's old house. And then a big event on the 9th at Seattle Town Hall. So we'll have all that linked up though underneath this episode. Um, what else was I going to ask you? Oh, yeah. For people who listen to this podcast and for people who just know about, my music or whatever, there's so much overlap in the book that I just kind of wanted to direct people to. So, yeah, second episode of this podcast, we had Derek Dizon, and you talk about Derek's parents in the book. His mother actually, which led to the birth of API Chaya. Do you want to talk about that at all, or?
Yeah, it feels almost bad to summarize around such tragic events,
I know.
but I will say, one thing I will say for people who pick up the book and they read about what happened
Mm-hmm.
to Susanna Remarada and to her friends, including Phoebe Dizon,
Yes.
and it's a gutting and heartbreaking story. And you realize API Chaya, this amazing organization that rose from that. Then go to your podcast and listen to that episode and realize another amazing
Mm-hmm.
person living, a living testament to the memory of his mother's love,
Yeah.
and what he's been able to do with that as well. I think that that's an amazing, important, healing experience to be able to have.
Yeah. And then my guest from last week is also in the book. Nikita Oliver talks about the work that they're doing with creative justice, I believe, and just work as an artist and an abolitionist. The artist chapter is beautiful. You got invincible and complex movements in there, and my friend DJ Ian Head, and that was such an amazing story to me because I've been friends with Ian and made music with him for close to 20 years, and I learned things about his life from your interview that I never knew, about particularly about his work in prisons. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, yeah. It was interesting because you had introduced me to Ian for this conversation. I, had seen Ian in places, but hadn't really known him the way you do, of course.
Mm,
And you were like, you should talk to Ian because you had remembered the work he'd done around Stop and Frisk, which we do talk
yeah,
about.
yeah.
And, his important work on that case. Um, but what he wanted to talk about was the work that he had been doing um, in prisons to help empower people who were incarcerated to
Hmm.
advocate for themselves while in prison. And like that work was something that you didn't know he had done, and it was so fun actually for you to read that part because you were emotional about it, and
Yeah.
this amazing things that your very very humble friend
Yes.
hadn't told you.
It's true. And there's a quote from Ian from the book that just always sticks with me when you asked him um, how he got into organizing, and he talked about all the artists that he was listening to, the hip hop artists. Do you want to retell that part of it?
Yeah, he. Oh, here. Let me see if I can just grab it real quick so that I can actually, have what he said. So this would be the abolition chapter,
Yeah.
and oh, that's the very first chapter of the book, and he's there. He is, and yeah, he said. I was listening to hip hop and hearing Black people talk about life experiences that are definitely different than mine, especially when it comes to law enforcement, what's happening with these prisons. And I believed those stories. And I'm not saying I'm special for that because everyone should believe those stories, but more that I feel like so many white people question and don't want to believe those stories unless there's three reams of data backing them up or whatever.
Hmm. That's just so profound to me. He's like, I listened and I believed them, and that led to an entire life of action. Like it's so amazing.
Right. And the power of art, right? The
Hmm.
power of storytelling, the power of hip hop to do that.
Right, right. Yeah, it's so amazing. What are some of the things that you hope people get the most from this book and from your life?
I really, I think it depends on who's reading it, right? I'm always
Yeah.
kind of keeping in mind of, you know, who. I hope that BIPOCs, especially Black people, right? I'm
Mm-hmm.
always thinking of Black women when I write,
Right.
will feel seen, represented, and will feel like their stories are worth telling. I hope that if they see echoes of their lives and what they want to accomplish or what they are accomplishing, that they'll realize that they matter in that really real way, that someone deserves to write a book about them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that they aren't alone, you know? And I hope in general, people feel inspired, that people do feel connected, that people feel hopeful, that people read the book and start looking around in their communities, their workplaces, and say, oh, let's get started. Where can I be a part of this? Or where is this important work being done? And where can I support it?
Yeah.
And I want that. I want it to feel doable. It's so, in a world that feels so brutal and problems that seem so large, we're in a genocide right now. We are
Right.
witnessing a genocide being paid for with our own tax dollars.
Mm-hmm.
And to say it's demoralizing is a gross oversimplification
Mm.
of the terror and horror and that, so many of us are feeling around this and the hopelessness that we're
Mm-hmm.
feeling around this.
Mm-hmm.
And as we work to end that, as we continue to speak out, also recognizing what we can do and how important it is to reaffirm the value and the humanity of BIPOC populations and to look for systemic harm where we are and fight that as well and know that we can. There's something about in these times being able to say, I did this thing today, and there's a measurable difference in how someone moves through the world because I was able to do that. Even if that person is just yourself,
Mm-hmm.
it is important. It is really vital, and it's what gets us through and gives us the strength to continue these really big, hard fights that we're in.
Yeah. Yeah. You got to start where you're at, and yeah, and do the best you can, and connect. Like yeah, that's real. I know you're I know you're in the very, very early stages of writing what's next. Do you want to talk about that at all? Like what's coming up for you
Yeah,
after this book
yeah.
tour? Promoting a book and is gonna be some time, but what are you looking forward to after this book is, does its thing in the world?
I mean, I'm looking forward to us traveling again,
Yes.
us getting some time out of the country. We've talked about that. But for writing, I'm looking forward to being a student of writing again. I'm
Amazing.
looking forward to dabbling with fiction. And I've talked about this for years, but I'm actually like part of a class that I'm sitting in on and started, writing things out and really excited to be able to take the time and energy. And actually, this office is a part of that plan as well, because when you're writing, when you're trying to stretch into new creative ways, interruption is a thing that can really, damage progress that you're in.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, excited about being a newbie in a writing space
Yeah.
and writing some really bad first drafts and making them better and
Yeah.
studying and trying new things. And, I love writing. I love writing. And I have since I was a very, very little girl.
Mm-hmm.
And when you spend years and years documenting violent white supremacy, it can take a toll.
Absolutely.
And part of what put that seed in me, and I don't know if we really talked about it.
Mm.
Do you remember when I did that speaker series and I sat with Sonia Renee Taylor?
Yeah, that was a beautiful event. Yeah.
It was a beautiful event. And we talked, and it was like this epiphany when she was talking about her move to New Zealand
Mm-hmm.
and doing this thing for herself that a lot of people said that she shouldn't do, that people tried to guilt her and about doing because, of course, Black women are meant to be consumed
Mm.
um, and not meant to live for themselves or care for themselves. They're supposed to care for others
Mm-hmm.
and produce for others. And realizing in that conversation with her how little of my writing, this love, this passion I had, and this talent I have went towards my own enjoyment of writing
Mm.
and towards something entertaining and joyful for community.
Yeah.
How much of it was in this place of emergency and struggle, and just realizing I didn't want to give white supremacy any more of that. Like, I
Yeah.
actually felt kind of ashamed, like embarrassed, because
Mm.
I'm always advising,
Mm-hmm.
Black people and Black women in particular to care for themselves and to remember that you're a part of what we're fighting for.
That's right.
And this talent, this art form that I love so deeply, for years and years, I had just been pouring it, you know, into the fight against white supremacy. And
Mm-hmm.
whiteness doesn't deserve it, you
Mm-hmm.
know?
Mm-hmm.
And not to say I have no regret about my books. I love my books, they're beautiful. And this one, I would say, also was a refutation of it, right? Saying I'm going to spend years actually in community,
Yeah.
and I'm going to put these beautiful stories and people in this space, was a direct refutation of this idea that I'm only here to
Right.
um, struggle in this work. And now the further step, even further, is I get to actually just enjoy writing. I
Yeah.
get to do the things that feed my like creative soul. I'm excited about it.
I'm so excited to see and hear and read it. And yeah, I'm so excited about it. And also, watching you write this book, because I got to have a first row seat to both Mediocre and this book, Be a Revolution. And with this one, I feel like it just seemed like you were so restored from all of the conversations you were having. And writing a book is hard, but I felt like you were easier with yourself on the process this time around, you know?
Yeah, shout out to my amazing therapist, honestly,
Yeah.
who helped me. Capitalism is a mind fuck, you know?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I would have these urges. I remember asking if something was wrong, that I couldn't force myself to work all night like I used to, that I couldn't push when I was tired, that I wanted to reserve evening with you and with the boys. Um, and my therapist just being like, well, this is kind of what happens when you start to heal, is you're listening now to the things you should have been listening to for a while, and you don't have the capacity to harm yourself in service of this work anymore. And embracing that, because I really wanted to fight it. I was almost hoping my therapist would tell me ways to get around that,
Yeah.
embracing that, letting go of this idea that um, how hard I worked would be externally decided. Um, that this book was going to be done when the book was going to be done, that I was going to care for myself and care for my family and stay connected, um, was something that I've never had in writing as
Mm.
an adult, as for a career. And for anyone who's listening who's written a book, I think this will be recognizable. Most writers I know, you fall apart in those final days, and you're not sleeping, and you're barely
Yeah.
eating, and you're eating junk food, and you're not seeing anyone, and you're wearing the same clothes for multiple days in a row. And you saw that with Mediocre. You
Yeah.
saw the multiple days without sleep.
I was
um,
delivering food and then leaving.
exactly, exactly, exactly. And this was not going to be that. I wasn't going
Mm-hmm.
to harm myself and my family and my connection to people that I love for this. And I do think the book is better for it, because it also
Mm.
allowed me to not be in this space of panic and exhaustion. And I could also say things like, I don't think this chapter is ready yet, and I'm going to take more time, even if, you know, I have to have a difficult conversation with my editor and my publisher. And, of course, having a really supportive editor means a lot, and I absolutely did. But,
Yeah.
you still get scared. You don't want to say, I'm not going to, I'm not ready to turn that in yet.
Mm-hmm.
And usually in the past, that part of me, that overachieving part of me that had been shaped by capitalism, would have just been like, get it good enough, you know,
Mm. Mm-hmm.
instead of saying, no, I'm not ready,
Yeah.
and it was lovely to be able to do that. And I think that the book benefited from
Yeah. That's life game right there for real. I thought of a question that I don't know if anyone else is going to ask you. Um, and I'll preface it with when I was at Clarion West and when I was, writing more sci-fi stories, regularly, my stories would have particular soundtracks. I could go back to certain songs and it would put me in the mindset of the story. I've noticed that you have music playing in your office a lot. What would you say the soundtrack was for Be a Revolution?
Yeah, this was actually, I would say that music played a bigger part in my being able to work this time around
Mm-hmm.
than in the past. Part of it, honestly, was I think, having ADHD, having anxiety disorder.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there were times where I didn't want to be in my head. And, like I'm really lyrically connected to music.
Yeah.
And so in the past, when my anxiety was really ratcheted up and I didn't have tools to deal with it, I actually couldn't listen to music
Mm-hmm.
because it would pull me into my head and my head wasn't a safe place to be in.
Mm.
And so often around deadlines, I couldn't listen to music. Being in a space where I was more centered, music then could set a mood for me.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was interesting, like looking back over the year and when I listened to the most, it was mood. It was real mood. So,
Mm-hmm.
you would think I was trying to seduce myself in my office every day, you know. Um,
That's hilarious.
a lot of Moses Sumney, a lot of Hiatus Coyote.
Mm-hmm.
Radiohead, of course, is always going to be a part of my
Mm-hmm.
life, and it's still in the top ones. But you would sit there and be like, where are the candles? What do
Yeah.
as you once famously said, that's sexy time music.
That's right.
Um,
I don't know if it's famously, if it's just between you and me.
well, it's famously when I insist on bringing it up all the time.
Okay. That's funny. uh,
But it was really chill, and it got me in this space of flow,
mhm.
and allowed my brain to just keep going. And I would find myself like the rhythm mattered more. It was less about lyrics, and it was like, what's the rhythm of this?
Yeah.
Does it keep me working? Does it keep me feeling warm and safe and
Yeah.
relaxed? And absolutely, dove into more new music,
Mhm.
new to me, this
Mhm.
year, as I was just going, let's see what else can, get me in this mood. Something about getting like a rhythm where you don't even realize you're moving to it while you're typing
Yeah.
can really help get flow going, and especially from, these really kind of creative sounds that are floating in the background, and you're hearing them but not hearing them, and then you'd be like, oh, that's interesting, and I would
Mhm.
like a song and then get back to, to
Yeah.
going. So music was always um, on repeat throughout. And actually, I do that. I use this program called Focus Mate,
Mhm. Oh, Focus
especially.
Mate was huge for you during this book.
Huge, huge, huge,
Yeah.
huge.
Can you
And if you have
talk about what it is for people that don't know?
Yeah, and if you have ADHD or just you're
Yeah.
struggling to like be creative or get the thing done and you're trying to work from home, FocusMate is this work sharing program, and it's online and it's really affordable. It's like $6 a month, I think. You can do it free, but it's then limited how often you do it. I do the $6 a month, and you
Mhm.
basically sign up for blocks of time, 25 minutes, 50 minutes, or 90 minutes, and you're paired up with someone and you're sharing a screen, kind of like you and I are right now.
Mhm.
You introduce what you're going to do for the block of time, and then you do it, and you stop talking to that person, you do the work, and then at the end you talk about what you did,
Yeah.
and then you can do another one. And for some people, at first I was like, is this going to be weird and creepy? And it's not. It's fascinating and wonderful. You have someone waiting on you. You're not going to be late. You're going to do the work. They can see
Mhm.
you,
Mhm.
so you're going to do work, and you're going to do the thing that you said you were going to do, and you get an insight into what other people do. And there's wild, like I'll always remember one time I was paired up with someone who was a card shark, and they were on a like one of those treadmill desks,
Uh-huh.
walking with headphones on, smoking
Mhm.
an e-cigarette and memorizing cards.
Wow.
And I was like, this is wild. I would like look up and
Yeah.
be like, all right, like card sharks got to work too, right? And it was really fun, and actually made some friends. But I would
Mhm.
just sign up for these sessions over and over and over and over,
Yeah.
and and it forces you to take a break in between, so you're not overworking. And but it was really funny because what brought it up was, the music in the beginning. I would mute usually, but in the beginning I'd introduce, and people would be like, man, I love your music. I got that compliment all the time. Some people would ask me, please don't mute, I just want to hear your music in
Oh
the background
wow. Oh
while you're
wow.
working. So it's good working music.
Oh, you were DJing for Focus Mate. That's amazing. I actually didn't realize that part of it.
Yeah, yeah. People would ask, and the only reason why I'd be hesitant is because I bought this really, you know, something. You know, I like a cute thing, right?
Uh-huh.
So I bought a keyboard that's really clicky because the keys look
Yes.
cute, and it's
Yeah.
so loud. I'm like, you're gonna be so annoyed
Yeah.
if I unmute because all you're gonna hear is,
Tap 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 tap.
yeah,
Yeah. That's funny. Um, yeah, Focus Mate seems like the next level of like the coffee shop office, like the digital version of it, you know?
right.
Yeah.
And you know, it really does matter when you have ADHD, you're jumping from hyperfocus to hyperfocus a lot, and that's not a way to work because you can't turn hyperfocus on. Uh,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and so when it's on then too, and you're going with it, you burn out.
Mm-hmm.
And so this stops you from burning out. You know, you can make a list of different things you're doing. You have that enough distraction to keep going because I think you know a lot of people with ADHD like me, you need a little bit of distraction.
Yeah.
You need something else happening, and then you also get to meet people. And when you're working at home,
Yeah.
just being able to meet someone different because it's people all over the world. So I'd be
Mm-hmm.
talking to some people and it's, you know, 3 p.m. where I am and it's the middle of the night where they are.
Yeah.
One guy I talked to, it was really interesting because he was on this island, like off in between the US and Europe,
Mm-hmm.
this small island. And that time of year, it never got dark. And so it was 3 o'clock in the morning where he
Wow.
was. And he actually, afterwards, was talking. He was like, "It's 3 in the morning," and I was like, "Really?" He's like,
Huh.
"It doesn't get dark here." And he took his camera and actually showed me and like out over the water because you know he just lives on this little island, and it
Yeah.
was like the middle of the day and it was a gorgeous space. But it was so fun to get to see the
Yeah.
other side of the world. You know, after finishing some work. So it was you know stuff like that is always it's a lot of fun.
That's so wild. And I think it really helped you focus just from, my observer point of view of like, because you didn't have a office out of the house for any of the book. Like you were
Yeah.
writing in the house. But like we'd be talking, you'd be like, "Oh, I got a focus mate session. I gotta go." And it really seemed to like keep you on task in a way that nothing in my life actually keeps me on task right now.
It really did, you know. It kept me on task and it kept people out of my
Who
office. You
did?
know, people would
Yeah.
walk in and be like, "Oh, you're," except for mom, you know,
Yeah.
because nothing will stop mom.
Right. It always looked like you were on a call and we didn't want to interrupt. Yeah.
I know, I love it. I
Yeah.
wasn't about to correct you. I was like,
Yeah. Yo, the secret ingredient, y'all, to work at home. It's focus, mate. Love. This has been such a joy and a pleasure. Interviewing your best friend, interviewing the main person that you spend like every day in your life with is always like, I don't know how this is gonna go, but I think it went well.
yeah. And
Yeah.
people just gonna watch me make googly eyes at you the whole
Right.
time,
No,
right?
I think we were good. It wasn't a lot of googly eyes this time. Is there anything else you want to leave with the people before we say goodbye?
Oh, I don't. I mean, you know, I would just say free Palestine. Like keep talking
Mm-hmm.
about it. Keep talking about it. The more we talk about it, the more it gives other people courage to talk about it.
That's
The
right.
more opportunity you have to connect with other people who truly believe in justice and liberation. Our safety is tied together, and we're learning right now who is truly invested in liberation and who isn't. And so that can be really heartbreaking on one end, but it's also really affirming on the other to know that I have built and deepened connections with people that I know will be here with me in this
Yeah.
struggle for the long haul. And so we have to keep doing this. And even if it feels hopeless, this work is vital. It's vital, even if it doesn't seem like we get these bombs to stop dropping. Every time we talk about it, we are
Mm-hmm.
opening people's eyes to the reality of our systems, the reality of capitalism, of colonization, right? And that you know, people don't unlearn that.
That's right.
So it's worth it. It matters.
Yes.
And we have to keep doing it. And we have to also stay aware of the real progress we're making that people are trying to erase, that our systems are trying to erase and make it seem like we're not doing it. So, yeah, keep speaking up for free Palestine. Keep speaking up for ceasefire. Keep talking about colonization. You know, keep talking about capitalism. And
Mm-hmm.
thank you for all of you who have been doing so.
That's right.
And connect with others and spend time with others who also believe in this and are fighting for this and share joy and laughter with each other as
Yeah.
well and make time for that.
Absolutely. It's so vital. I think that's my favorite thing about going to protests is just being with other people that are with you, you know? And like
People don't get how affirming and beautiful
it's
and
so affirming.
life-giving the
Yeah.
protests actually are. Even at times when they seem gutting, like you're surrounded by people who
Mhm.
are in this fight with you, and people are,
Yeah.
hugging and just giving loving looks at each other, and
Mhm.
helping people be able to have access in the spaces. And it's just a really beautiful thing. I recommend, if there is a protest happening in your area, go. Please
Yeah.
go. You'll love it. It will give you so much.
Yes, absolutely. I know you got another call. So, yeah, thank you. Thank you for everything, Joma. So much. Love you.
Thank
And
you.
yeah, go get that book, y'all.
Yeah.
And we'll
All
talk to you
right.
soon. This is the Worldwide
Love you, honey.
Underground.
I'll see you at home.
I want to thank my love, Ijeoma Oluo, one more time for her time, her stories, and for putting this book into the world. Be a revolution. Once again, we got the information for how to get this book and where to see us in person, linked up in the description of this episode. Thank you again to everyone who supports us here on the Substack, on the Worldwide Underground. We appreciate you all so much. I'll be back with you in 1 week, for real this time. I can say that with confidence because I pre-recorded. Malkia Devich Cyril is going to be my guest next week. We're going to be talking about media justice and a whole lot more. Till then, see you out here in the streets. Free Palestine. And be a revolution. All day. Peace.